Bill Welsh, who's our president, followed by a talk from our principal scientist, Dr. Loren Ame, and then from Riska Solomon, who is our behavioural analyst. Bill Welsh is the founder and president of our charity. Bill was a very successful businessman, but Bill's life was changed forever by the advent of autism in his family, and he became an energetic and passionate advocate for those with autism. He is probably one of the best versed laymen in this subject area. He is an energetic and effective campaigner, and he is working very hard to bring the plight of those with autism to the notice of those who can do something about it, whether they like it or not. And ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll find all three talks very interesting and thought-provoking, but without more ado, I'd like to hand over to Bill. Thank you.
We have quite a number of our graduate volunteers here tonight. Our clinic is quite often very busy because we have a number of graduates and students, PhD students who are volunteers in the clinic. They come from every nation in the world. We have a variety of languages and what have you. And it's very, very interesting for a young guy like me to meet all these young students. It's terrific. But there are difficulties because we had a sort of buffet evening recently. And it was a lovely buffet, a great spread. Dr. O'May had provided some wonderful food. And I turned to this young woman standing behind me. I don't know where she came from. And I just said, do you like scampi? And she said, I love all these British television programmes for children. I'd like to touch on three distinct issues prior to showing you a short film. Firstly, the number of autistic children in our society, followed by the cost of autism. And finally, I will clarify the role of Autism Treatment Trust in the community of autism. One child in 66 has a diagnosis of autism in the UK today, mainly boys, one boy in 40. This figure doesn't come from Autism Treatment Trust, it doesn't come from me, it comes from Cambridge University's Autism Research Unit. The Cambridge Autism Unit had this astonishing figure 4 years ago and kept it in a drawer. When they published last year, I phoned them and said, how do you explain that we have one child in 66 with a diagnosis of autism? And they said, well, better recognition. But why should they delay publishing that figure for 4 years? And I tell you why. Because it contradicts everything that the academics have ever said about autism. An earlier study in The Lancet in 2006 concluded that one child in 100 in the UK had the diagnosis of autism. That figure appeared somehow to be more acceptable to government and to many in the autism community. One child in 100 has a previously rare condition, but hey, that seemed to be okay. Prior to 1990, autism was incredibly rare. A medical doctor, a GP, could spend his entire working lifetime and never meet an autistic child. A retired paediatrician in the United States told me that in 1975 he actually took a plane from New York to Pittsburgh just to see an autistic child. Today, autism is more common than Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, childhood leukemia combined. One child in 66 has a diagnosis of autism. One child in 100, if you're more comfortable with that figure. What this increase from rare to common tells us is that autism is not solely genetic in origin. Environmental factors are at play. I contacted the Autism Unit at Cambridge again and asked them to explain the growth in autism to one child in 66, and they said once more, better recognition. Better recognition. Many of the children we see at our clinic can't talk. What we've been told is that in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, parents didn't notice that their children couldn't talk. Doctors didn't notice that there were children who couldn't talk. Teachers didn't notice that there were children who couldn't talk. being fed again and again is exactly the same better recognition garbage. Why? Because these statistics challenge the traditional view of autism that it is solely genetic. The Centers for Disease Control in the USA has described the rise in autism as a national crisis. Here in the UK, silence. Genes load the gun. The environment pulls the trigger. The fact is that since the early 1990s, a new and far larger cohort of autistic children has emerged. They present new problems and demand new solutions. This is a new problem. This is not an old problem getting larger. This is a new problem. This government, I sincerely hope, knows about this. We've certainly told them often enough. Even if they do reject our ideas of the causes. For the government, the impact of 1 child in 66 with autism so far appears too overwhelming for it to be faced openly. The lifetime cost to society of an autistic child has been estimated at £3 million. There are well over 5,000 autistic children in schools in Scotland today. Surely somebody in authority can do the maths. There's a £15 billion problem sitting in our schools. Fact, 1 child in 66 has autism. Fact, you don't get genetic epidemics. Autism must be redefined now. It is an environmental illness with genetic susceptibilities. We should be investing our research money into discovering environmental factors that we can change, not more genetic studies that offer no hope. Intervention. Pesticides, mercury, aluminium, antimony, drugs, dietary factors, infectious agents. They should all be the focus of the research agenda. But it's not happening. The real cost of autism is heartache. The breakup of entire families, of marriages, of lives spent watching a child, often in distress every day, with no hope and no help being offered. We at Autism Treatment Trust believe that for many children and their families, we can change that. Some opinions, just quick opinions, taken from the pre-1990 literature about autism. Autism is solely genetic in origin. Nonsense. These kids don't show love. Nonsense. These kids can't copy. Nonsense. These kids can't be helped. Nonsense. The condition is lifelong and incurable. Nonsense. Autism Treatment Trust is a parent-driven organisation. We receive no funding from the chief scientist, although we should. We receive no funding from the chief medical officer, although we should. We receive no funding from this Scottish Parliament, although we most certainly should. How do ordinary parents break this cycle? Where the traditional view of autism as being solely genetic reigns supreme, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Why is there a failure to recognise this new autism? Autism Treatment Trust is in an awkward place in the community of autism. We challenge the traditionally held views about the condition. We believe that we are witnessing, what we're witnessing with today's children may be related to, but is different from what the previous experience was. This is a new, different subgroup. We believe the kids are ill. We believe we can prove that. For example, there are already, not 1, not 2, 9 peer-reviewed published studies which show that autistic children have bowel inflammation and bowel disease, and yet there is no protocol in place in this country to have autistic children bowel examined. No protocol at all. And if a parent takes their autistic child to a doctor and asks for that child to have a bowel examination take place, invariably they will be refused. Our children are caught in a vicious trap. Please help us change that. Now let's see a short film with some of the children in the film. After which Dr. Lorena May will say a few words. Thank you.